Ethan Blake sat on the porch of his home in a quiet suburb of Columbus, absent-mindedly watching the sunset. His mind was elsewhere. Uneasiness had been lurking in his soul for the past few weeks. The suspicion had not arisen suddenly. It had been building up in small signals and details that he had initially dismissed. But now these signs were coming together to form a clear picture. This evening, the sun was slowly sinking behind his neighbor's neat lawns, reddening through the branches of the old maples. Ethan noticed automatically that a cyclist was riding down the street. Usually, such small things calmed him after a day of work, but not now. Now the tension was growing inside him. His wife, Madison, was again staying late at work without any clear explanation. For the second time this week. Madison was the principal of an elementary school and often stayed late on business, or so she said. Ethan used to believe her implicitly. The principal was always busy with meetings, reports, extracurricular activities. But lately his wife's excuses began to sound far-fetched. He recalled a recent evening. She arrived at almost 10, citing an unscheduled meeting. It would seem that there was nothing unusual but her face. It was excited, rosy, her eyes sparkled as if after a joyful event, and not a difficult meeting. Then he noticed a faint, barely perceptible scent of someone else's cologne on her jacket. Travis Holt, the school coach, used something similar, he involuntarily recalled. The thought seemed absurd and unpleasant, and he hastened to drive it away. However, the aftertaste remained. In 9 years of marriage, Ethan had never seriously doubted his wife's fidelity. Their life flowed smoothly, work, home, caring for the children. Their daughter Ava was 9, their son Lucas was 6, and family had always been a priority for both of them. Or at least that's what he thought. He remembered the moments when other husbands would suspiciously ask their wives where they were late, but Ethan had never even thought of such a thing. He was so confident in Madison. He had always been proud of their honesty with each other. Ethan sighed, remembering another detail. A week ago, he had accidentally taken Madison's phone when his own battery died to call a neighbor. When he unlocked the screen, he saw a pop-up notification, a message from someone named T with a heart emoji. He frowned then, but did not read someone else's correspondence, embarrassed by his own mistrust. Madison, seeing the phone in his hands, nervously snatched it away, claiming it was personal. She smiled, but there was panic in her eyes. Just a teacher named Tammy upset about the competition grade, nothing special, she quickly explained. Ethan nodded, trying not to show confusion, but doubt was already creeping in. Since then, there have been a few more such little things. Madison began to lock herself in her office more often, saying that she was on a work-related call, although she used to calmly talk about school matters in front of him. A couple of times on weekends, she allegedly went to the school district office on work matters, which almost never happened before. She returned from there with the same blush on her cheeks. Two halves of Ethan were fighting inside. One, the rational one, was convincing him that he was just working himself up for nothing. Maybe his wife was stressed at work, so she was acting unusually tired, and that was why she seemed excited or distracted. The other half, the emotional, wounded one, was whispering that everything was for a reason, that his heart sensed something was wrong. He noticed how Madison had become distant. She had become colder in bed and was less and less likely to seek intimacy, citing fatigue. She had almost stopped talking about her affairs, although she used to share the details of each day. The children's laughter came from the kitchen. Ava was showing Lucas something on the tablet screen. Ethan smiled at the sound of their happy voices, but anxiety immediately filled his heart with renewed vigor. For their sake, for the children's sake, he had to understand the truth. If something had happened that threatened to destroy their family, he had to know. The saddest thing was that he didn't dare ask his wife directly. The fear of confirming his worst fears was robbing him of his resolve. And how could he ask? "Honey, are you cheating on me?" It was absurd and painful even to say it out loud. The car door slammed as Madison returned. Ethan snapped out of his thoughts and stood up to greet his wife. She was walking quickly up the path to the house, holding a bag of papers. When she saw her husband, she waved and smiled, but it seemed forced to him. "Hello, dear," she said, a little louder than usual, too cheerfully. "Sorry, I'm late again. I'm swamped with work before the school holiday." Ethan swallowed and tried to answer calmly, "Hi, it's okay. We've already eaten dinner. Should I leave you some food?" Madison walked up to the porch and gave her husband a quick kiss on the cheek before heading inside. "I grabbed a quick bite on the run, don't worry. I have a little more work to do at home today. The reports won't write themselves." He nodded silently after her. The children appeared in the hallway. Ava happily ran to her mother with a story about how she and her dad had played a board game that evening. Madison patted her daughter on the head as usual, smiled at her son. For a moment, the picture looked almost normal. Here she was, their mother, back, busy but loving. But Ethan's gaze involuntarily lingered on her bag. The edge of a sports t-shirt with the school team's insignia peeked out from under the folders. Coach Holt wore the same t-shirt. He handed them out to the teachers last week before the baseball championship. Why did she need it today? A bad feeling tightened his chest. Ethan looked away, meeting his wife's gaze. She was already looking at him, as if expecting some kind of reaction. For a split second, wariness flashed in her eyes, but then it was replaced by a gentle expression. "I'll come by later to kiss them good night," she said softly about the children and headed into the office, closing the door tightly behind her. Ethan ran a hand over his face. His heart was pounding. He didn't want to believe it, but the puzzle was coming together every day. The late nights, the secretive conversations, that Coach Holt, the friendship that was too close, which he had never questioned before. It seemed like it was time to stop fooling himself. Something was really going on, and it seemed like Madison wasn't being honest with him. That night, Ethan lay awake for a long time. Ava was quietly snoring next to him. The girl sometimes asked to sleep with them, but today she came to him alone. Probably, she also sensed the tension between her parents. Lucas was put to bed in his room, and now his peaceful snores could be heard from the slightly open door. Ethan looked at the ceiling, trying not to disturb his daughter with unnecessary movement. He listened to the rustling of papers in the office behind the wall and the quiet creaking of the chair where Madison was working at the computer. Usually this sound lulled him the knowledge that his beloved wife was nearby, busy with the work she loved. But now every rustle only reinforced his anxiety. Was she really working now? Somewhere around midnight, the sound stopped. Light footsteps were heard as Madison finally went to sleep in the guest room so as not to wake Ava. She had been doing this for several nights in a row. "So you can have more space with your daughter," she said. But Ethan knew that in reality she was avoiding intimacy. He closed his eyes. He couldn't pretend that everything was normal anymore. His hands were shaking with tension, barely contained anger and fear all mixed together. What if this was true? What if he was losing his family right now, and he was doing nothing? In the darkness, he carefully climbed out of bed, pulled the blanket over Ava, and walked into the kitchen, careful not to make the floorboards creak. He poured himself a glass of water. His chest burned. Ethan opened the window above the sink, letting in the crisp night air mixed with the scent of mown grass. He took a few sips and made a decision. He had to know the truth. No more guesswork and nagging doubts. If Madison had violated the boundaries of their marriage, he owed it to himself, to the children, to their future. "I'll figure it out," Ethan said quietly to himself in the empty night kitchen. "No matter how much it hurts, I have to know the truth." With these thoughts, he returned to the bedroom, where Ava, without waking up, had stretched out in her sleep toward his side of the bed. He lay down next to her, hugging his daughter. His heart was still pounding loudly, but the decision had been made. Tomorrow, he would find a way to clarify the situation once and for all. The next morning, just waiting for the kids to leave for school on the bus, Ethan took the first step toward finding out the truth. He decided to seek legal advice. He had an old friend in Columbus who had once helped a colleague with divorce papers, and it was from him that Ethan learned of a smart family law attorney. Her name was Naomi Perez. Naomi's office was in the center of town, in a low brick building that housed several private law firms. Ethan stepped out of the elevator on the third floor and stopped in front of a door with a sign that read, Perez and Associates, Family Law. His heart ached. Only yesterday he could not imagine that he would cross the threshold of such an office as a client. He was met at the reception by a secretary and soon led into a small but cozy office. Diplomas and family photos hung on the walls. A mug with the inscription "Best Lawyer" and a pot of ficus stood on the table. Naomi herself sat at the table, a short woman of about 40 with dark hair pulled back into a bun and attentive brown eyes. She stood up, holding out her hand. "Ethan Blake. Hello, please come in." "Hello," he replied quietly, shaking her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to see me so quickly." Naomi nodded towards the chair opposite and sat down herself. "Of course. A colleague briefly described your situation. You seem to suspect your spouse of infidelity?" Ethan felt a lump in his throat. It was surprisingly difficult to articulate what was gnawing at him. He ran his hand over his knee, gathering his thoughts. "Yes. You see, I'm not sure yet," he began cautiously. "But I have serious reasons to think that my wife, Madison, may be cheating on me." Naomi bowed her head, listening attentively and without judgment. "What are the grounds? Have you found any evidence?" Ethan sighed. "So far, only indirect. She's often late, secretive. I noticed a strange message on her phone. Her behavior changed. And there's a specific person with whom, it seems to me, she might have a connection. Travis Holt. He works with her at the same school, a coach." "I see." Naomi looked at him sympathetically. "Have you spoken to your wife about this directly?" "No," Ethan shook his head. "I'm afraid to hear confirmation, or to be wrong and blame her for nothing. I don't want a scandal, especially because of the children, but I can't live in uncertainty either." The lawyer was silent for a while, thinking about what she had heard. Then she folded her hands on the table. "Your feelings are understandable. The situation is difficult. Do you want to save your family if you turn out to be wrong? Or are you already determined to take certain measures if your suspicions are confirmed?" Ethan felt his insides clench at the word measures, but he answered honestly. I don't know. It hurts me even to think about it. I love my wife. But if she really crossed that line..." His voice wavered. "Then it's a betrayal, and I can't pretend nothing happened." Naomi looked at him carefully. "I understand. My advice is to first make sure of the facts. If your suspicions are not confirmed, perhaps you and your wife will simply need a frank conversation or even the help of a family psychologist to figure out where the mistrust came from. But if everything is confirmed," she paused, "then you have the right to certain legal steps, and it is better to prepare for them in advance so as not to act rashly." Ethan nodded. That was why he had come, to hear from a professional what to do if the worst turned out to be true. "What do you advise? How to prepare?" Naomi leaned back in her chair. "First, collect evidence, but carefully within the law. Don't hack her accounts, don't install any bugs, this could backfire on you. But you can, for example, carefully check her correspondence, if possible, or ask someone you know to keep an eye on what's going on. Sometimes people hire private detectives in such cases." He winced, the thought of a detective following Madison making him uneasy. "I'm not sure I'm ready to do that," he muttered. "It's up to you," the lawyer answered softly. "The main thing is to have at least some facts. Photos, messages, witness statements. Especially considering that in your case, this is not just a family matter. You mentioned that your wife's alleged partner is her subordinate, right?" "Well, the coach technically reports to the school principal, yes," Ethan confirmed. Naomi pressed her lips together. "You see, if the affair is really happening, it's also a violation of workplace ethics. At school, such relationships are usually forbidden or at least frowned upon, especially if she's his boss. It could have professional consequences for her." Ethan lowered his head. "I don't wish her any harm, but it's wrong for everyone. For the kids at school, for our kids." "Sure, and if confirmed, you'll have the right to file a formal complaint with the school district. Typically, Human Resources or the Ethics Committee will handle these types of issues. So, essentially, tell her superiors." "Yes, If the school principal is in an unethical relationship with a subordinate, this is grounds for an internal investigation. But we will discuss such steps when there is clarity. Ethan nervously rubbed the bridge of his nose with his fingers. It all sounded hard, but he knew. Naomi was right. He had to face the truth. Okay, let's say I confirm that they are having an affair. What's next in terms of the family? Divorce. The lawyer leaned forward slightly. It depends on your decision. In Ohio, you can file for both divorce and legal separation if, for example, you are not ready to immediately dissolve the marriage for some reason, but cannot live together. In case of divorce by mutual consent, if you manage to agree, the process will be relatively calm. If not, there will be a trial in court. And what are the grounds? Does treason play a role? Ohio recognizes both no-fault and fault divorce. Adultery can be cited as a reason, but frankly, it makes little practical sense. Property is divided roughly equally, and courts don't focus much on the fact of adultery unless it's about the impact on children. However, the moral and ethical aspect may affect how your lawyers negotiate. I see. The children are the most important thing, Ethan said quietly. Naomi smiled with understanding. Of course, you and your wife have two minors, and their well-being is a priority. If it comes to formalizing a divorce or a separation agreement, you will need to resolve issues of custody, residence, and alimony. It is better if you try to peacefully agree on joint or separate custody, a meeting schedule. The court, of course, can issue a temporary order if you do not come to an agreement immediately. Temporary order. Well, a temporary court order. It is issued to determine during the litigation who the children live with, who pays alimony, who stays in the house, and so on. But if you draw up an agreement with your spouse in advance, the court will simply approve it. Ethan chuckled quietly without joy. Agree peacefully. I'm afraid that's unlikely if the truth comes out. She loves children, of course. But I can't imagine how we'll be able to discuss everything calmly after this. Emotions are a bad advisor, Naomi agreed. But that's why it's better to think everything through in advance and try not to act rashly. Perhaps it's worth formalizing separate living arrangements first, a kind of pause, establishing rules about where the children are, when who is with them, financial matters, and then, if anything, divorce. Ethan nodded, although his soul protested the very fact of the need to discuss such a thing. Good. At the very least, I want to ensure the safety and normal life of the children, no matter what happens between the adults. That's the right approach, the lawyer approved. Then the plan is this: you confirm or deny your suspicions. If, unfortunately, they are true, come to me, and we will develop a strategy. I think it makes sense to immediately prepare the papers for separate living, an agreement that will stipulate with whom the children are, financial support, a schedule of communication, and at the same time, a complaint to the school district if you decide to file one. Is it possible to do everything as calmly as possible, without unnecessary noise? Naomi smiled softly. We will try. My task is to protect your interests and the interests of the children. Sometimes loud showdowns only do harm. It is better to formalize all agreements officially and clearly than to create scandals. She pushed the notebook towards him. Let's write down the key points you want to secure. For example, do you want the house to remain yours and the children's for the duration of your separation? And what about custody? Joint custody with primary residence with you, right? Ethan ran his hand over his face in shock. Talking about such things was hard, but he pulled himself together. Yes, the children should stay with me, at least until everything settles down. The house. The house was bought together, but I wouldn't want to pull the children out of their familiar surroundings, school. Of course. So, you will stay in the house with the children, and Madison can rent a place to live for this time if she wants. In the future, this may form the basis of a property division agreement, but let's not get ahead of ourselves for now. As for alimony, are you both working, and are your income levels comparable? Approximately, he answered. As a director, she probably earns even more than me. I see. Then, perhaps, you will be entitled to child support from her. But again, We can come to an amicable agreement on joint coverage of expenses. We'll see. Ethan smiled weakly. This all resembled a business conversation, but it was about his life, and that made him feel uneasy. You know, he said quietly, I still hope that this is some kind of mistake, that none of this will be necessary. Naomi looked at him seriously, but with warmth. I understand. Let's hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. If it turns out you're worrying for nothing, great. If not, at least you'll have a plan. They agreed to call each other in a week for an update. After saying goodbye to Naomi, Ethan walked out of the office onto the sunny street, feeling both relieved that he was taking concrete steps and pierced by the knowledge of where those steps might lead. He was shaking inside, but at least he had a certainty. He needed to find out the truth and, if necessary, act decisively but sensibly. For the sake of the children, for himself, for the sake of preserving what could still be preserved. A few days later, a chance to test his suspicions presented itself. Friday morning, Madison mentioned that she had an important principals meeting at the school district after school and might be home late. Ethan nodded, trying to act casual, even as his insides went cold. This was his chance, maybe his only chance to get to the bottom of the truth. That afternoon, he arranged for a neighbor, Mrs. Carmichael, to take Ava and Lucas home to play with her kids after school. Ethan made up an excuse to stay late at work. In fact, by 3 o'clock he was free, sitting in his car in the parking lot of a supermarket near the school campus, with a good view of the exit. He knew that formal classes ended around 3:30, but Madison usually stayed longer. He had to wait. His heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like everyone around him could hear it. Ethan was sweating from the tension, his palms gripping the steering wheel. He was trying to get his mind set. Whatever the truth was, he would accept it. The main thing was to know for sure. Time dragged on painfully. Around 4 in the evening, teachers and parents who had picked up their children from after-school care began to leave the school parking lot. The cars were leaving, the flow of people was thinning. Ethan peered closely at each figure emerging from the school doors. Finally, around 4:30, he saw a familiar figure. Madison had come out of the side entrance of the administrative wing, but she wasn't alone. There was a man walking next to her even from a distance. His athletic build and distinctive gait were clear. Travis Holt. An elderly security guard followed a few steps behind. Locking the school door, they must have been the last ones to leave the building. Ethan ducked low to avoid being seen. The car was parked far enough away that he could see through the windshield. Madison and Coach Holt headed toward the far corner of the lot where Travis usually parked. There was hardly anyone around anymore, just a couple of cars left. They stopped at Travis's car. In the gathering darkness, Ethan saw his wife and Holt exchange glances. Then Travis put his hand on her shoulder, said something quietly. Madison smiled, a smile wider and more genuine than Ethan had seen in a long time. His heart sank. The next second, Travis leaned down and kissed her briefly on the lips. Madison didn't pull away, on the contrary. She closed her eyes and responded to the kiss. Ethan's vision swam. His worst fears were confirmed. That was enough. In 1 minute, his whole world collapsed. His heart felt like it was being torn apart. A lump formed in his throat, and his breath caught in his throat. Instinctively, he pulled out his phone, his hand shaking as he tried to aim the camera and record what was happening. Although the light was poor, he managed to get a few pictures. They clearly showed Madison and Travis hugging each other by the car. He wanted to jump out of the car, scream, separate them, attack Travis. Hot blood was pulsing in his temples. But Ava and Lucas's faces appeared before his eyes. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, trying to control the anger and pain that was surging through him. No, making a scene now would only make things worse and possibly traumatize the children if word got out. Better to do it right. He remembered Naomi's even voice. Don't act rashly. Gather evidence and act judiciously. Back in the parking lot, Madison pulled away from Travis. She looked confused, looking around, perhaps worried that someone might be watching. Ethan hunched his head even lower, feeling his breath burn his throat. It physically hurt to watch, but he kept his eyes on her. Travis opened the passenger door of his SUV for her. Madison climbed in. The coach closed the door, walked around the car, and got behind the wheel. A minute later, the headlights flashed on and the car pulled away. Ethan came to his senses. They were leaving together. Where to? The thought that his wife was about to go somewhere with her lover pierced his heart with a new wave of pain. He quickly started the engine of his car and, keeping a distance, drove after her. It soon became clear that Travis was heading out of town. He turned onto a highway that led to a lake, a popular vacation spot near Columbus. Ethan knew the direction. There were several campgrounds and motels along the water. His heart sank. Was this a love nest? The journey took about 20 minutes. All this time, Ethan rode behind at a decent distance, trying not to lose sight of them, but also not to give himself away. His thoughts were racing. He had already seen enough to know the truth. Why was he continuing to pursue them? But some part of his soul demanded to be completely sure, so that not a single % of doubt remained. As they approached a small roadside inn by the lake, Ethan dimmed the headlights and slowed down. He saw Travis ahead of them, parking at one of the cabin motels. Madison got out of the car, looked around, and had an anxious expression, as if she was afraid of being exposed. Travis quickly walked up to her, touched her back reassuringly. They exchanged a few words, then headed for the door of the cabin with the number on the wall. Ethan stopped in the shade of the trees, about 50 meters away. It was dangerous to follow further. They could see the car. He parked and got out, leaving the headlights off. His heart was pounding somewhere in his throat. He felt like he was going to throw up. He moved cautiously through the bushes, trying to stay out of sight. There was an empty space between the house, and it was impossible to get close without being seen. But there was a light on in one of the windows, and the curtains weren't completely drawn. Ethan froze, seeing shadows through the gap in the curtains. Then the shapes became clear. He made out his wife's figure. Her back was turned, and Travis was holding her from behind, kissing her neck. Madison turned, wrapped her arms around his neck, and they merged in a long kiss. It was enough. The world swam before his eyes, and Ethan felt tears streaming down his cheeks, the first in a long time. Pain pierced his chest, hurt, rage, bitterness, all at once. On top of it all, a strange clarity washed over him. Now he knew for sure. No more guesses, no more hopes for a mistake. Reality was staring him in the face. His wife was cheating on him. He stepped back, legs stiff, trying not to make any noise. Another second, and he might have barged in, heedless of the consequences. But the children didn't need a scene at the police station or in the papers. He needed to protect them, not satisfy his own wounded ego. In the darkness, Ethan turned and almost ran back to his car. He was shaking like he had a fever. The ground seemed to be slipping out from under his feet. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, trying to stop shaking. The phone in his hand was blinking. The battery was almost dead. He quickly typed a message to Naomi Perez. "It's true. They're having an affair. I saw it." Then he added, "What do I do now?" Despite the late hour, the answer came in a couple of minutes. "Leave calmly. Don't give yourself away. Come to me tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We'll discuss the plan." Ethan read the message several times. Drive away calmly was easier said than done, but he had to. With a shudder, he started the engine and turned the car around, heading back to town. He sobbed silently as he walked, gritting his teeth to keep from screaming. Images flashed through his mind. Madison beaming in her wedding dress, her eyes looking up at him with love at the altar. Ava's birth, holding her daughter and whispering how happy she was. All those moments now echoed with pain. Had they lied when they swore to be faithful in sorrow and in joy? Had her smiles then been insincere? A treacherous pain tore at his chest, but through his tears he repeated it like a mantra. For the children, for the children. He would not let this betrayal ruin everything completely. He would keep them safe and loved, no matter what decisions he had to make. Ethan returned home late at night. Never before had the journey home seemed so long and difficult to him. Every minute on the road, he was tormented by images of betrayal. burning with unanswered questions. Having taken the sleeping children from Mrs. Carmichael and thanked her, he took Ava and Lucas home, put them to bed. He himself did not sleep until the morning, sitting in the kitchen in the dark with a cup of still drinking cold coffee. His phone was lying on the table nearby. On the screen were the very same photos that made him sick. But he forced himself to look at them over and over again to more clearly understand. There was no way back. Towards dawn, tired and drained, but no longer crying, Ethan finally whispered to himself, "Enough." He wiped the tears from his face and took a cold shower. Today was the beginning of a new chapter, the chapter of fighting for his family, for his children, for his own dignity. The fall school chili cook-off was one of the most anticipated events of the year in their suburban community. Long before the event, the entire school and many families prepared. Students decorated classrooms with fall crafts, parents cooked signature chili recipes, teachers organized contests. On Saturday afternoon, the schoolyard came alive with tents everywhere, decorated with garlands of orange flags. The delicious smells of chili and fried sausages wafting from everywhere, the cheerful shouts of children, families with children strolling between tables, tasting dishes and chatting. On the stage near the gym, contests were periodically announced and sponsors were thanked. Ethan held Lucas's hand, carrying a tray with 2 plastic bowls of chili in his other hand, one for his son and one for Ava. The girl was walking a little ahead with a friend, the daughter of their neighbor, David Walsh. David and his wife, Emily, were there, competing in a chili contest. Ethan caught a glimpse of them at one of the booths. They waved at him, and he nodded and gave a forced smile. The weight of what was to come was heavy on his soul. He noticed Madison standing out from the crowd of smiling parents and teachers. She was standing at the school administration table, talking to a parent, a friendly, official smile on her face. Travis Holt, in a school-issued windbreaker, was helping with maintenance. They kept their distance in public, keeping up appearances. But Ethan knew the truth, and it made him smile bitterly at their apparent perfection. A week had passed since he had discovered the affair. During that time, Naomi had prepared the necessary paperwork. Ethan decided not to delay. He wanted to make his intentions known as soon as possible. Today, he had come to the party not only for the children. Inside, under his jacket, he had 2 envelopes. One addressed to Madison, an official notice of separation and upcoming divorce proceedings. The second to Travis, a copy of the complaint sent to the school district for violation of ethics. Naomi had discouraged her from making a scene in public, but Ethan convinced her that he could not do otherwise. It was a rare opportunity to catch them together outside of the office. Besides, he did not intend to scandalize, only to hand over the papers. They chose a moment when the children would be engrossed in games with friends, in order to protect them from unnecessary scenes. "Dad, can I have some more cornbread?" Lucas was drawn to the smell of freshly baked goods from the next table. "Of course," Ethan nodded. "Let's go. Ava will catch up with us." He took his son to the tent where volunteers were handing out baked goods and asked for 2 cornbreads. While Lucas's treat was being wrapped, Ethan looked around for Ava. Ava was already sitting at a table with a friend, eating her chili. Emily Walsh was watching over them, chatting amiably. Ethan nodded gratefully from afar. Everything was going well, the kids were busy and well looked after. Taking a deep breath, Ethan walked resolutely toward the administration table, clutching the envelopes tighter under his jacket. His heart was pounding furiously again. "Keep calm, just keep calm," he reminded himself. Madison noticed him when he was already a couple of meters away. Her smile faded slightly in surprise. "Ethan," she said, taking a step away from the parents she was talking to, "have you tried our signature chili yet?" She spoke with deliberate cheerfulness, clearly trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy. Travis looked at him warily too, but said nothing, continuing to hand out plastic spoons to someone. Ethan stopped in front of his wife. People were milling around, no one cared about them, which allowed him to speak quite freely. "We need to talk, and now is better." Madison's smile faltered. She glanced quickly at the crowd, no one nearby was listening, and whispered through her teeth, Now? Here? This is neither the time nor the place, Ethan. Let's do it later, at home. He shook his head slowly. I'm afraid it's too late. With these words, he took the first envelope out from under his jacket and handed it to her. Madison looked at the white envelope in shock, not immediately extending her hand. What is this? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Notice of our official separation and impending divorce, Ethan said quietly but clearly. Madison paled, her eyes widening. She grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away from the crowd. Are you crazy? What scam? What nonsense? Travis, hearing the word divorce, stopped fiddling with his cutlery box and looked at them warily. Some passing parents cast curious glances. Ethan took a step closer to his wife, lowering his voice. This is not nonsense. It's serious. It states here the terms on which I propose separate living. It's all peaceful and fair, Madison. In the interests of the children, I advise you to read it and sign it. Madison's gaze darted from the envelope to her husband's face, her cheeks burning with either anger or shame. Are you serious now? Like this, in the middle of a celebration? Are you trying to make a scene? Ethan smiled bitterly. A scene? No, Madison, I'm avoiding a scene. I'm just calmly letting you know what I'm doing. She bit her lip, apparently unable to think of anything to say right away. At that moment, Travis approached them, clearly sensing the tension. He coughed awkwardly. Hey, is everything okay? Maybe you really should. But he didn't have time to finish. The second envelope was already in Ethan's hands. Travis Holt, Ethan said clearly, looking straight at the coach. This is for you. Travis stared at the envelope he held out to him, confused. What? Me? A complaint filed in your name with the school district, Ethan explained, feeling strangely calm at that moment. About your breach of professional ethics. The coach's face flushed. He glanced around quickly. No one standing nearby seemed to be listening yet. He stepped closer, hissing. Dude, what are you trying to achieve? Let's do this without. In front of everyone. Ethan didn't move, continuing to hold the envelope. Take it. You'd better read it. It says there that an official investigation has been initiated. What the... Travis glanced nervously at Madison. Maddie, this is... Madison finally found her voice. What have you done? She hissed at her husband. Why the hell did you start complaining about work? What did you expect? He answered quietly but firmly, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were full of rage and panic, but deep inside he could see fear. Dad! Ava's voice suddenly sounded from somewhere to the side. Ethan turned around. Ava and her friend were standing about 10 meters away, looking at their father and mother in surprise. Apparently, the girls had come closer, noticing the tense conversation. His heart ached. He didn't need the children to become witnesses. Madison noticed her daughter too. She immediately rushed to Ava, hiding the envelope behind her back. Hi, honey, are you okay? Go play with your friends for now, okay? Ava frowned, sensing something was wrong. Mom, what happened? Why are you and Dad arguing? We're not fighting, honey, Madison said quickly, clearly trying to soften her voice. It's just grown-ups talking, no big deal. Go see Mrs. Walsh, will you? Emily Walsh came over, drawn by the situation. She looked questioningly at Ethan and gently took the girls' hands. Girls, come over there to me. I'll show you a secret on our table. Ava reluctantly followed her, still looking around. Lucas was luckily nowhere to be seen. He was probably still with David. Ethan let out a quiet breath. His heart was pounding like crazy. Another second, and the situation could get out of control. But fortunately, the children were distracted. I think that's it, he told Madison and Travis, lowering his voice. You have the paperwork. My attorney knows, the school district knows. It's official from here on out. How could you? Madison looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes, the first time in a long time he had seen her cry. But he felt no sympathy. Everything inside was still seething with pain and anger. You both did the best you could, he replied bitterly. Now it's my turn to do what I should. Travis gritted his teeth, crumpling the envelope in his hands. You'll regret bringing this out into the open. Ethan flushed, but held his temper. Isn't that a threat? He asked coldly. Say it again, and I'll have a reason to ask for an official ban on you coming near my family. The coach fell silent, his eyes flashing angrily. Madison took a step forward, trying to grab her husband's hand. Please, let's talk in private, I beg you. But Ethan had already pulled away. It's too late, he repeated, trying not to look at her, so as not to flinch from the overwhelming, conflicting feelings. Take care of yourself, Madison. He turned and walked quickly away toward where his children stood. Behind him, he heard his wife's muffled sob and Holt's quiet curse. But that didn't stop him anymore. David hurried towards him, holding Lucas by the shoulder. The neighbor asked in a worried voice. Hey, what's wrong? Emily says you have. Later, Ethan muttered, carefully taking his son's hand. Sorry, Dave, no time for that now. He leaned towards Lucas. Hey, baby, everything's fine. Let's find Ava and go home, okay? Dad, where's Mom? The boy asked, feeling his father's tension. Mom's busy at work, Ethan said evasively. See her later. Lucas frowned, but obediently followed. Ava ran out from under the tent to her father. Dad, Mom is crying. Why is she crying? Ethan pressed his lips together. He knew there were explanations ahead, and they wouldn't be easy. Mommy's just sad, he answered quietly. Let's go home, I'll explain everything later. The children fell silent, sensing their father's unusual seriousness. Ethan thanked his neighbors for helping with the children and, almost without remembering himself, as if on autopilot, took his son and daughter away from the school holiday, which suddenly ceased to be a holiday for their family. Monday started off uneasily for Madison. After a wild Saturday night that had ended with all the usual foundations being torn apart, she was about to go to work to the same school where she was the principal and Travis was the gym coach. It seemed impossible, but she had to maintain the appearance of order, at least in front of her subordinates and the children. In the morning, Madison pulled herself together and arrived at school a little earlier than usual. She walked into her office, closed the door, and finally allowed herself to rest her head on her folded arms. The 2 days since the chili cook-off had been hell. Ethan had taken the kids away, and she hadn't seen them since. On Sunday, she'd spent the entire time reading the papers her husband had handed her. They were crystal clear. He was demanding a legal separation, keeping the kids, accusing her of adultery. And then there was that damn complaint to the district. The thought of her colleagues finding out made Madison shudder. Her mind raced, searching for a way out, deny it, beg Ethan to withdraw the statement, ask Travis to deny everything. But the paperwork had already been filed, and a scandal was inevitable. Travis. She remembered his face after Ethan left, anger mixed with fear. He left the party soon after, too, muttering to her only, "We'll sort this out on Monday." They had called each other yesterday. The coach had been on edge, saying that it was all nonsense and that he won't let some aggrieved husband ruin his career. He had tried to persuade her not to admit anything, but to file a counter-complaint against Ethan for slander. Madison knew that was nonsense. There had been no slander, they both knew it. And Ethan, if he had gone so far, would have probably taken care of the evidence. The thought of it burned with shame. How did I get to this point? She asked herself, replaying the last few months over and over again. Yes, she had been starved for attention. The affair with Travis had overwhelmed her, made her feel alive. But now the price was going to be the end of everything. Her family, her job, her reputation. She straightened up, took a deep breath. The main thing now was to hold on. Maybe the complaint wouldn't reach everyone at once. Maybe the management would try to resolve the matter quietly. If she was lucky, she would be able to convince them that everything was exaggerated. Someone knocked on the door. Madison flinched, but quickly pulled herself together. Yes, come in. The voice still trembled slightly. The door opened slightly, and the secretary appeared. Mrs. Blake, there's, someone from the district office coming to see you. They want to talk. My heart sank somewhere to my heels. Already? So fast? Who exactly? Miss Henderson from the HR department and another gentleman. I think he's a lawyer. Her throat dry, Madison forced herself to nod. Invite them, please. The secretary retreated. A few moments later, two people entered the office. The first was a thin woman of about 50 with a short haircut and a stern expression. The second was a man in glasses with a briefcase under his arm. Both looked impenetrable. Good morning, Mrs. Blake, the woman began dryly. I'm Judy Henderson, the school district's human resources specialist, and this is Michael Norton, a representative of the legal department. Good morning. Madison's voice broke treacherously. To what do I owe the visit? Although she already knew the answer, she tried to stall for time. Miss Henderson motioned for everyone to sit down. The male lawyer pulled some papers out of a folder. I'm afraid it's nothing pleasant, Henderson said formally. We have a delicate matter to discuss with you. The district has received a complaint. A complaint? Madison tried to sound surprised, but her voice was weak. Yes, Mr. Norton said, looking at the papers. A written statement from Citizen Blake setting forth the facts indicating that you violated the school's code of ethics. It concerns an alleged intimate relationship between you as the school's principal and one of your subordinates. Madison felt her cheeks flush. This is some kind of misunderstanding, she began, but Henderson raised her hand. Let's make it clear right away. We don't draw conclusions in advance. But due to the seriousness of the allegations, we are obliged to conduct an investigation. During the investigation, you will be suspended from your duties as director. Suspended? Madison couldn't help but say, standing up. But this is standard practice, Mrs. Blake, Henderson snapped. You are taking administrative leave during the internal investigation. It is in the interests of all parties to ensure objectivity and avoid complications. Lawyer Norton carefully placed a copy of the complaint in front of her. Please review. This contains allegations that you had a close relationship with Coach Travis Holt, that this relationship affected the work environment and may be considered a violation of the district's policy on inappropriate relationships between management and staff. Madison's eyes scanned the lines. The wording was formal, but the gist was clear. Ethan even included dates and things he could have observed, like spending time together outside of work on October 14th, presumably the Friday he'd tracked them down. Her heart sank. He'd seen it all. That's not true. She squeezed out, unable to think of anything better. Who could? Mrs. Blake, Henderson interrupted dryly. As part of the procedure, you will be able to give written explanations and answer the committee's questions. Our task now is to notify you of the beginning of the investigation. Here is the official letter, copy to you. She posted another document. It also says here that during the investigation you are temporarily suspended from your position without the right to access official documentation. Madison could hardly believe that all this was happening for real. But school, who will manage it? They'll appoint an acting director, the personnel officer snapped. I think it'll be your deputy, Mrs. Harris. Judy, do you have anything else for her? The lawyer asked quietly. Yes. Henderson looked at Madison over her glasses. You must leave the school building immediately. You must collect your personal belongings, hand over your keys, and your work laptop within 1 hour. You are not allowed to discuss the nature of the investigation with your colleagues. The committee will contact you with further action. Can I call a lawyer? Of course, it is your right. There was silence. Madison dropped her hands. She had nothing more to say. She knew it was useless to resist. Okay, she said barely audibly. Henderson stood up. We understand that the situation is difficult, but the district has zero tolerance for such violations. Try to pull yourself together. Madison nodded automatically. The lawyer and HR manager left, leaving her in the deafening silence of the office. Tears of humiliation and anger welled up in her eyes. But there was little time. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and immediately dialed Travis's number. Hello, came a second later. Judging by the noise on the line, it sounded like he was in the gym. Travis, it happened, Madison whispered hoarsely. They're here. I've been suspended. Damn, he exhaled. I just got picked up too. I'm sitting with the district director. She didn't hear anything further. The voice floated away. There was another knock on the door. The confused secretary stood on the threshold. Mrs. Blake, I was told I have to take the keys from you. Madison dropped her phone on the table. She realized that there was no point in resisting any further. All that was left was to hope for a miracle, that after the investigation she would be somehow acquitted. But a heavy certainty grew in her soul. The career she had built for so many years had collapsed overnight. Meanwhile, outside the school walls, the world went on as usual. And for the Blake family, a new stage was beginning, living separately and fighting for the future of their children. The house was empty. The silence hung in the rooms like an unusually heavy weight. After Saturday night, Madison did not come home for the night. Ethan put the children to bed without her, making up the excuse that his mother was busy at work. He barely slept that night, too many thoughts and worries. On Sunday morning, his phone vibrated several times from her calls, but he did not answer, not being ready to talk calmly. Madison finally came home that afternoon to get her things. Ethan sent the children to the Walshes to play in advance, to protect them from a possible quarrel. The tension was palpable as Madison stepped through the door, duffel bag in hand. She paused in the living room, looking around like a guest. "Where are the children?" she asked quietly, avoiding his eyes. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had recently cried or screamed. "From the neighbors," Ethan answered evenly. "I thought it would be easier for you to get your things." She nodded and went into the bedroom. He followed her, unsure if he should leave her alone. You never know, maybe she'll tear his clothes in a fit of anger or something. Madison, however, was calm. She opened the closet and began to haphazardly throw clothes into her bag. There was silence for several minutes, broken only by the shuffling of coat hangers in the closet. Finally, Madison couldn't take it anymore. "So that's how it is, how everything will be now." Ethan crossed his arms over his chest, leaning against the door frame. "We'll be living separately now," he said quietly. "It's all written down in the documents. I think you should sign them." She turned around, her eyes burning with resentment. "Sign? Are you kidding? After what you arranged?" "What exactly did I do, Madison?" he asked, his voice low. "I handed you the papers peacefully." "Right in front of half the school," she raised her voice. "You exposed me in front of everyone." "I confronted you with a fact that you created yourself," Ethan snapped, also starting to seethe. "Don't turn it upside down. Who exposed who? Have you thought about how you made a fool of me by dating Holt for months?" She bit her lip, but continued angrily. "That doesn't justify what you did. You filed a complaint. You're trying to destroy my career." "Career?" He smiled bitterly. "Did you think about your career when you slept with your subordinate? Or are these rules not for you?" Madison flushed. "Listen," she tried to pull herself together. "We've both gone too far. Let's at least sit down now and discuss everything calmly. Without lawyers, without the bosses, for the sake of the children." Ethan shook his head. "Calmly? After what happened? Do you understand that you have ruined our lives?" "It's my fault," she blurted out in a trembling voice. "Yes, it's my fault, but can't I turn back?" "Well, yes, I made a mistake." He raised his eyebrows at her words. "Mistake, that's what she called betrayal." "A mistake?" he echoed. "A connection lasting months is a mistake?" "I'm not making excuses," she sobbed. "But it just happened that way. I lacked warmth, attention, and you were always busy with your own worries." "I see," he said coldly. "So it's my fault then. I didn't give you enough attention, poor thing, and you went looking for him." "I didn't say that." "That's exactly what you just said," Ethan snapped. "You know, don't go on. There's no excuse." He uncrossed his arms and walked a little closer. "Madison, it's settled. I hired a lawyer. I have proof of your connection. You violated all boundaries, destroyed trust. What is there to discuss?" She covered her face with her palms. Children was all she whispered. The children will stay with me for now, he said crisply. You can see them, of course, but we will live separately. You already understand. I don't want them to be with you for long now. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Madison dropped her hands, her eyes flashing with worry. You can't take my children away from me, she whispered. I'm their mother. And I am their father, he retorted. Nobody is talking about taking them away. It's just better for them to stay with me for now. You're in a difficult situation right now. You understand. You're going to tell everyone, right? She asked sharply. All your neighbors, your friends, what a piece of crap I am, so they'll hate me. I didn't tell anyone anything, he answered wearily, but people aren't blind. And let's be honest, whoever did badly should be ashamed. Madison sank to the edge of the bed, looking broken. I'm confused, she whispered. Is it all over already? Ethan clenched his fists, feeling both pity and anger at the same time. It's the same as before, yes. It will be different. I don't intend to live with a man who betrayed me. So, a divorce? Is that what you want? For now, let's start with living separately, he answered firmly. And the divorce, we'll see how it goes. But the chance that I'll change my mind is very small. She closed her eyes, 2 tears rolling down her cheeks. I'll sign everything, she finally squeezed out. Whatever you want. Just let the children be happy, please. Don't turn them against me. I would never do that, he shook his head. They love you, you're their mother. I'm not going to tell them the details, at least not yet. Let's say we have adult problems. Madison wiped away her tears. She was silent for a moment, then asked, Where should I live? Ethan shrugged. That's up to you to decide. Maybe at your sister's, or rent an apartment. Travis, you think? She smiled bitterly. He remained silent, realizing that the question was rhetorical. Madison began packing her things again. Just before leaving, she stopped at the door with a bag over her shoulder. Can I see them soon? I can't be without children for long. Ethan sighed. In a couple of days, let them get used to it a bit. I'll bring them or... No, it's better if we're on neutral territory. A park, a cafe, a cinema will agree. She nodded. She hesitated for a second, as if she wanted to hug him, or at least touch him goodbye, but he pulled back, making it clear that he didn't want that. The door closed. Ethan was left alone in the empty house. The silence was oppressive. He slowly walked around the rooms, the nursery, the living room. His wife's things disappeared from sight. Lucas's toy, abandoned on a chair, stared with empty eye sockets. He collapsed on the sofa, suddenly feeling tired. Finally, everything was said, decided, done, and in his soul emptiness and quiet grief. Why? He whispered to himself, but there was no answer. That evening, he called Naomi, saying that Madison had agreed to the terms of separation and was ready to sign the papers. The lawyer praised him. This would simplify the further process. When the children returned from the neighbors, Ethan felt a surge of determination. Now he was entirely responsible for them. He needed to get their lives in order, to act as both parents. He cooked macaroni and cheese for dinner, the children's favorite dish, and tried to act cheerful. Ava and Lucas, however, noticed everything. They cautiously asked if Mom would be back soon, why she was not there. Ethan answered evasively. Mom was busy, everything was fine. But this could not continue for long. The moment for a frank conversation was approaching. On Monday morning, getting the kids ready for school, Ethan followed the exact schedule he had come up with the night before. Wake up, breakfast, get ready, all on him. Previously, Madison had taken on some of these morning chores, but now Ethan managed on his own, although it was unusual. On the way, Naomi herself called him. Ethan, how are you? I wanted to check. Did Madison sign the consent form? Hi, Naomi. He'll sign today. We agreed to meet in the evening. Excellent. And also, I learned unofficially that your complaint was accepted by the district. It seems that they have already started an investigation today. Yes, indeed, quickly, he muttered, recalling his wife's pale face. Well, such cases are taken under control immediately, the lawyer answered. In general, be prepared that rumors may reach your children or your friends. You may have to explain the situation more broadly. I understand. Thank you. He hung up and let out a heavy sigh. And then there was this. The whole town would probably find out soon, but there was nothing he could do about it. That afternoon, after work, Madison called him. She seemed to be crying. You got your way, she said into the phone. I've been suspended. For how long, I don't know. Maybe they'll fire me for good. Are you happy? Ethan was silent for a few seconds, struck by the mixture of pity and indignation that rose within him. Finally, he answered, I'm sorry it happened, but you knew the risks. What a pity, she cried. You just destroyed everything. Your family, your job. Why did you have to complain to your boss? You couldn't just. What couldn't? His voice became firm. Keep quiet. Pretend nothing happened. Sorry, Madison, but no. Consequences are the natural result of actions. I'm not responsible for them. She sobbed. You hate me. He closed his eyes, trying to remain calm. I don't hate you, but I can't feel sorry for you now the way you want. I need to think about the children. Oh, of course, you're the Holy Father of the year, she said sarcastically through her tears. And I'm a monster, right? Enough, he snapped. Let's not do this now. We'll discuss all the details through lawyers. He heard her about to say something, but then changed her mind. Only quiet sobs were heard. Take care of yourself, he added more gently. And think about the children, too. They need stability. Madison didn't answer and hung up. Another difficult step had been taken. Now they were truly living apart. There was much to do. Tell the children the truth and establish a new daily life in which Madison was no longer around. That night, Ethan put Ava and Lucas to bed, read them a story, and stood in silence, staring at the empty half of the marital bed. Where his wife had once slept, there was now a stack of papers from the lawyer. On one hand, sad symbolism, on the other, harsh reality. I'll talk to them tomorrow, he decided firmly, meaning the children. There was no time to waste. They needed to know what to expect, even if it was in a gentle way. Thus ended the first day of Ethan's new life, a life apart, full of pain, but also determination to protect his little family. The next evening, Ethan felt the moment had arrived. After dinner, he called the children into the living room for an important family talk. Ava and Lucas exchanged glances, the way their mother usually gathered them together when something important had to be announced. Now their mother was gone, and the tension was evident on their faces. Ethan sat down on the couch, his son and daughter nestled close to him, pressed against him on either side. He put his arms around them, trying to give himself confidence. His heart ached. These two were the most precious things he had, and he was about to hurt them with the truth. Dad, what happened? 9-year-old Ava asked quietly, looking into his face. There was fear in her big brown eyes. Ethan hugged his daughter a little tighter. Kids, you've probably noticed that Mom hasn't spent the night at home for several days now, and that you rarely see her. Lucas, a 6-year-old, nodded immediately. Yes, Dad. Where is Mom? Doesn't she love us anymore? Ethan's heart sank. No, what are you saying, baby? He stroked his son's light hair. Mommy loves you very much. We both love you and always will. Then why isn't she home? Ava persisted, trying to remain serious, although her voice was shaking. Ethan sighed. Many possible phrases were spinning around in his head. None of them seemed ideal. He decided to speak directly, but gently. You see, sometimes adults have such problems, among themselves, that it is difficult for them to live together for some time. Did you and Mom have a fight? Luca asked, looking from his dad to his sister. You could say that, Ethan nodded. My mom and I aren't getting along very well right now, so we decided it would be better for us to live separately. Are you getting a divorce? Ava blurted out suddenly, and a tear rolled down her cheek, even though she was trying to hold on. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He turned to his daughter, wiping a tear from her face with his thumb. Honey, for now we'll just live separately. That doesn't mean we won't both be with you. I'm always there, and Mom will see you, of course. We just won't live in the same house for now. Ava blinked rapidly, suppressing tears. Is it because we behaved badly? No. Ethan was taken aback by how much this standard child's thought hit the mark. He gently took his daughter's palms in his. No way. You have nothing to do with this, do you hear? Absolutely not. This is just my and Mom's business. You are wonderful children. You have done nothing wrong. It's just that Mom and Dad. He hesitated. Mom and Dad can't be together now because they have hurt each other so much. Did you fight? Lucas asked, frightened. No, no, of course not. Father shook his head. Nobody fought. We treated each other badly, and we need time to sort things out. Ava burst into tears again. Is it because of that Saturday? I saw Mom crying, and you were angry. Ethan tensed. His daughter was observant beyond her years. Partly yes, he admitted. Unfortunately, we found out some things about each other at the party that upset everyone. But let's not talk about the details. The main thing you should know is that Mom and Dad love you. We just can't live as one family right now. Forever, Lucas asked in a thin voice, his eyes filling with tears as well. Ethan shook his head, feeling like he was barely holding on. I don't know, baby. I hope not. Maybe someday we'll be able to fix everything. But I can't promise. He pulled his son closer, and Lucas buried his face in his chest, sobbing softly. Ava wrapped her arms around her father's neck as well. For about 3 minutes, they just sat there, hugging each other, while the children cried, digesting what they had heard. Ethan stroked their backs, repeating, I love you, and everything will be okay. Ava finally raised her head. And Mom, where does she live now? For now, with his girlfriend, Ethan answered, having thought out a neutral version in advance. Then maybe he'll rent an apartment nearby. She left us? Lucas asked through sobs. No, of course not, exclaimed the father. We just decided that it would be better for everyone. When will we see her? Ava wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Very soon, Ethan assured. I think we'll all go out together this weekend. Or Mom can take you for the day. We'll talk about it. So now we will live sometimes with you, sometimes with her. For now you'll be with Dad, and see Mom as often as possible. Then, maybe, take turns. We'll decide what's best. Lucas, calming down, raised his head. Will you make peace? Ethan didn't know what to answer. He stroked his son's head. I don't know, my friend. I really hope that we can at least not fight. But together, probably not anymore. The baby started crying again, and Ethan held him tighter, exchanging glances with Ava. The girl wiped away her tears like an adult, trying to pull herself together for her brother's sake. Dad, she said quietly, are we going to see a doctor for things like this? Well, family, we have a psychologist at school, Miss Turner. She said that if something happens at home, you can talk to her. Ethan was surprised by the maturity of the question. Do you want to talk to Miss Turner? I don't know. She's kind. Maybe she'll help Lucas. He's little. Lucas sobbed. I'm not small. Ava smiled sadly through her tears. I know, it's just that I'm the older sister and I have to take care of her. Ethan felt a sense of pride and a piercing tenderness. You're both great, he said. You know what? If you want, we can all go see a special guy or aunt who helps families through this kind of thing. They're called a family therapist. They're like psychologists, but for the whole family. The children looked at him with interest. Do we need it? Asked Luca. I don't think it would hurt, nodded the father, because you probably still have a lot of questions and feelings that are hard to understand, and me, frankly, too. Such a person will help us cope better. Okay, Ava said quietly, a little calmer now. Let Mom come too then. Ethan hesitated. Maybe a little later, Mom too. But first, I think the three of us would go for a walk, and then we'll see. Ava nodded, understanding even without words. Mom was still on the sidelines. The conversation was coming to an end. The children were tired of crying, and it was already time to go to bed. "Can we all sleep together in the big bed tonight?" Lucas suddenly asked quietly. Ethan smiled through the tears that welled up. "Of course you can. You even need to." That night, the three of them lay huddled together on Ethan's wide bed, Ava half asleep, holding her father's hand, and Lucas snoring on his chest, exhausted from crying. Ethan stared at the ceiling through the tears he had allowed himself to shed in the darkness. They were tears of grief, for his old life had been destroyed, and tears of relief, for the worst was over. The children knew the truth, albeit softened, and still loved both their parents. He kissed each sleepy face and whispered, "I promise you, we'll get through this. I'll do everything to make you feel good." A soft snore answered. Ethan, for the first time in days, fell into a deep sleep, surrounded by the most precious thing he had, his children. It had been a week since Madison had moved out. Slowly, a new routine was being established in the Blake household. Ethan knew that the kids needed stability, and to provide it, he would need clear rules and a routine perhaps stricter than they had been in their two-parent household. On the first Sunday morning, the three of them woke up together, still in the same bed. After the stressful days, it was even nice, not to rush anywhere, to lie down for an extra half hour. But he did not allow himself to lie around for long. Carefully getting out of the embrace of his daughter and son, Ethan went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Usually on Sundays, Madison did this, delighting everyone with pancakes. Ethan did not often cook complex dishes before, but now he decided to support the tradition. "Dad, your food is burning." Ava's cheerful voice was heard from the kitchen door. Ethan snapped out of his reverie indeed. The first pancake had turned dark brown. He chuckled and threw it in the trash. "It happens," he smiled at his daughter. "I'll get the hang of it now." Lucas, stretching, also entered the kitchen, dragging a blanket behind him. "Breakfast will be ready soon, boys," Ethan announced. "But I could use some help. Who wants to cut some fruit?" "Me," Ava responded. "And I'll set the table," Luca declared importantly, still lisping a little on some letters. Ethan was surprised inwardly. The children joined in enthusiastically. Before, they used to be capricious in the mornings, but here it was obvious. They were trying to help Dad in Mom's absence. He noted to himself, it was important to support their initiative. Breakfast was not as airy as Madison's, but it was heartfelt. At the table, Ethan started a conversation. "Let's discuss how we'll manage now. Mom usually helped us, did a lot around the house. Now she's gone, which means we need to work as a team." A team, like in baseball, Lucas, who loved sports analogies, asked. "Exactly," Ethan winked. "I'm the coach, you're my most important players. Everyone will have a role." The children nodded. They liked this game. "So, first of all, the house is in order. We'll clean together every Saturday, okay? Everyone has their own area of responsibility. Ava, you'll be responsible for your room and help me a little with the living room. Lucas for his room and picking up toys all over the house if they get scattered. I'll be responsible for the kitchen, the yard, and everything heavy." The children nodded in agreement. Previously, some of these duties had been mostly carried out by their mother, but they were old enough to start participating. Also, the evening routine. New rule. After dinner, we all wash the dishes together. No exceptions. Lucas Prince. "Even me. I'm small, I can't have plates, I might break." "You'll dry the plastic bowls and utensils." Ethan came up with a solution. "Ava will rinse, and I'll wash. Like a chain. We'll try it tonight." "Okay," the boy agreed after thinking it over. Ava asked, "What other rules?" Ethan put his fork down, looking at both of them seriously. "The main rule, we support each other. We talk if someone is sad or scared. We don't keep it to ourselves. We remember that we are a family, even if it's not a complete one now." Ava reached across the table and covered her dad's hand with her palm. "We can handle it, Dad. Right?" Ethan's nose almost stung with tenderness. "Of course, my dear." After breakfast, they all tidied up the kitchen. Ethan noticed how the new responsibility even cheered up the children. They felt like important helpers. Of course, not everything went smoothly. On Monday morning, they were almost late for school. Ethan spent a long time fiddling with Ava's hair, trying to braid it the way her mother did. In the end, neighbor Emily, who had just dropped off her children, saved the situation. In 5 minutes, she made Ava a neat braid. "Thank you, Emily," Ethan said with a smile, but blushing with awkwardness. "You're welcome," the neighbor waved her off. "Call me anytime." Ava felt more comfortable with her braid and went to class in a good mood. In the evenings, Ethan introduced a new rule. At dinner, everyone tells how their day went, plus they always name one pleasant event of the day. This helped the children focus on the good. He himself also shared honestly, although there were few pleasant things, he made up something small, for example. "Today I made a new dish," or "At work I was praised for a project." He also set a rule: no negativity about Mom. He firmly told the children, "We won't be angry with Mom. We won't speak badly of her. She loves you. It's just hard for her right now, just like it is for us." The children, especially Ava, listened seriously and nodded. Emotions, of course, raged. Sometimes Ava would break out in anger. She would say, "But Mom wouldn't do that," or "Why isn't Mom here? It's her fault." Then Ethan tried to calm her down and explained that Mom made a mistake, but she was still their mother. He himself never allowed himself to scold Madison in the presence of the children. He restrained himself, even if everything was boiling inside. This was an immutable rule for him. Finally, they agreed on a routine for communicating with their mother. On the advice of Naomi and a child psychologist whom Ethan consulted, they decided to make a schedule of calls and meetings so that the children felt predictable. Every evening at 7 o'clock, their mother calls via video link to say goodnight and talk about how their day went, and on weekends time together. The first video call was not easy. At the appointed time, Ethan and the kids sat down in front of the tablet. When Madison's face appeared tired, with red eyes, Lucas immediately brightened. "Mommy," Ava also smiled happily, although more reservedly. "Hello, my dears." Madison's voice trembled. "I'm so glad to see you." "Mom, we made pancakes," Lucas bragged. "One burned, but I barely spilled any syrup on the table." "Really? What a good boy." She smiled through her tears. Ava showed a picture she had drawn at school. Madison praised it, but it was obvious she was having a hard time. She asked, "Are you coping? Doesn't Dad overload you?" "We have rules now," Ava said seriously. "But that's okay. We help." "That's good. I miss you so much," Madison said quietly. "We too," Lucas muttered, looking dejected. "Mom, are you coming home soon?" Madison looked guilty, unsure of what to say. Ethan intervened gently. "Mom can't now. Remember, we talked. But you'll see her on Saturday." "Really?" The boy perked up. "Yes, we'll all go to the park or wherever you want," Ethan confirmed. "Hooray," Lucas exhaled. Madison smiled sadly. "I'll be waiting for Saturday with you. Study well, listen to your dad, okay?" "Okay, Mom," Ava replied. "You too, get well soon." By the end of the call, Madison had tears in her eyes, but she held them in. After saying goodbye, the tablet went dark. The children looked sad, but Ethan distracted them by reading a story together, and the night passed peacefully. The new rules and routines didn't immediately take away all the pain, but they gave them direction. The children felt more secure in this structured life, and Ethan, though he was terribly tired, sometimes collapsing on his bed exhausted after yet another busy day, noticed that he himself found solace in these routines. The house was alive, albeit differently. He and the children coped, building their new normality step by step. A few weeks after the separation, it was time to make things official. The legal process was gathering momentum. On Naomi's advice, Ethan filed for a temporary order, a document that determines during the transition period who gets to keep the children, who provides for the family financially and how, and other important details. The county family courthouse was bustling with couples and lawyers, all with worried expressions. Ethan sat nervously on a bench in the hallway with Naomi. Ahead of them was a short hearing before a judge about temporary measures. Madison was there too, a little way off, with her lawyer, a short, gray-haired man named Robert Hayes. Ethan caught himself glancing at his wife a couple of times. She looked pale and tired. She hadn't returned to work in the past few days. The investigation was ongoing. All this couldn't help but affect her appearance. At some point, she looked at him too, and their eyes met. Madison quickly looked away. "Are you nervous?" Naomi asked quietly, leaning toward him. "A little," Ethan admitted. "I've never. Well, this is a trial." "Don't worry. We've already agreed on everything, remember? Most likely, the judge will just ask a few questions and approve our agreement." Ethan nodded, trying to relax his shoulders. Indeed, thanks to Naomi's efforts and Madison's unexpected compliance, the basics of the temporary agreement had been agreed upon in advance. The children would live with their father, their mother would see them on weekends, and one evening during the week, the marital home would be temporarily at Ethan's and the children's disposal, and Madison would rent a place to live. Financially, they would temporarily split the bills, each paying their own expenses, and they would agree to spend equally on the children, without official alimony, since their incomes were roughly equal, though now, given Madison's estrangement, it was more difficult. But Ethan didn't want to make things worse, so this would do for now. "The Blake case," came the secretary's voice from the door. Ethan and Naomi stood up. So did Madison and her lawyer. The four of them walked into a small courtroom. The judge, an older woman with kind but watchful eyes, sat at the dais, shuffling papers. The hearing was almost formal. The judge asked whether the parties agreed with the agreement presented. Naomi confirmed for her client, Madison's lawyer for her. Madison herself remained silent the entire time, only nodding her head in agreement when the judge looked at her. Ethan, too, uttered only the necessary few phrases. "Yes, Your Honor," when asked if he had entered into the agreement voluntarily and understood its terms. At the end, the judge, having run through the text, announced, "Well, I approve the agreement between Blake's parents regarding the terms of temporary separation. A temporary order is hereby issued. The details set forth in the agreement shall be given the force of a judgment until a final settlement or further order of the court." She looked up at both spouses. "Mr. and Mrs. Blake, I hope you understand that you are now obligated to strictly comply with the terms of this order. First and foremost, in the interests of your children." "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan and Madison answered almost in unison. The judge softened her tone a little. "I wish your family stability. Perhaps you should seek family counseling. The court is always happy when parents reach an agreement peacefully." "Thank you, Your Honor," Madison said quietly, her only words. The sound of the gavel ended the hearing. As they all filed back out into the hallway, Ethan felt a strange sensation. On the one hand, relief. Now his rights and the rights of his children were officially protected. On the other, bitterness. Everything had become truly real. Their marriage had, in fact, already been declared broken. Although these were temporary measures, they were legally separated. He turned around. Madison, having dismissed her lawyer, was standing nearby, fiddling with a copy of the court order. At one point, she glanced at him and suddenly came over. Naomi tactfully moved to the wall, pretending to look through her phone. "Thank you," Madison said quietly. Ethan raised his eyebrows in surprise. "For what?" She looked down. "That you didn't complicate things. That you let me see them, and you don't demand money." Ethan shrugged. "I'm doing what's right for the kids. They need to see you, of course, and I don't want to drag them into financial squabbles." Madison nodded, pressing her lips together, and suddenly covered her face with her hand for a moment, holding back a sob. "Oh my God, what have I done?" He had nothing to say to that. He didn't console her, he couldn't. He turned around silently, motioned for Naomi, and headed for the exit. The sun was shining outside, people were going about their business. Ethan took a deep breath. One stage was over. There were more challenges ahead, but now he felt that at least the children were protected, and he and Madison were not openly at war. A peaceful phase secured by the court. Congratulations, Naomi smiled as they reached her car. You held up well. Thank you, Ethan nodded. What next? The lawyer asked. Are you going to file for an official divorce, or will you just live like this for now? Ethan thought about it. When he had originally planned it, he had been determined to get a divorce. But now, seeing how broken Madison was, he wasn't sure rushing into a final breakup was the best idea. The kids had been through enough. So far, he replied, we'll see. The main task now is for the children to come to their senses, and well, time will tell. Naomi nodded in agreement. Sounds reasonable. But know this, I am always ready to see things through to the end, as soon as you decide. After saying goodbye to the lawyer, Ethan headed to his car. On the way, he received a text from his neighbor Emily. Everything is okay. I picked up the kids from school. They are waiting for you. He asked her to look after him that day while he was in court. He wrote briefly, I'm already on my way. Thank you very much. Then he got into the car and allowed himself to sit for a few seconds with his eyes closed. The trial phase was over. A temporary order had been established. Now life. Ethan started the engine, feeling the heavy weight of nervous anticipation lift. At least on paper, there was certainty, which meant he could focus on what was really important, their daily lives and the well-being of their children. As hard as it was for the Blake family, they gradually became convinced that there were enough kind people around who were willing to help. In a small suburban community where everyone more or less knew each other, news traveled fast. The story of the school principal who unexpectedly took a leave of absence gave rise to rumors. Many parents suspected a scandal. Some saw the scene at the chili cook-off. Some heard about Madison's suspension. But to the credit of neighbors and acquaintances, no one pestered Ethan or the children with questions. On the contrary, people tried to be tactful and supportive. Already in the first week after the breakup, Ethan felt this wave of sympathy. The Walsh's neighbors, David and Emily, became a real support. Emily, without asking too much, offered to pick up Ava and Lucas from school if he was late at work, brought hot lunches, knowing that it was difficult to cope with cooking and work alone. Emily, you're just our angel, Ethan would say when she showed up on the doorstep with another pot of homemade soup or casserole. Nonsense, she waved it off. We're neighbors and friends. Besides, my kids like to play with yours. It's not hard for us. David would invite Ethan to go jogging or to the gym in the evenings, realizing that he needed to let off some steam. And when Ethan initially refused, not wanting to leave the children, the neighbor insisted. Take them with you. Ours are doing their homework at this time. Let them do it together. I'll help keep an eye on them, and we'll get away for at least an hour, have some fun. These short breaks really helped Ethan maintain his mental balance. During runs with his friend, he could talk it out. David listened, nodded like a man, sometimes threw a strong word at the situation, but not insulting Madison personally, rather cursing the circumstances. This gave an outlet for emotions. Support came from more unexpected places, too. One evening, as Ethan and the children were walking around the block, Mrs. Johnson, an elderly neighbor from down the street, approached them. She was known for her nosiness, and Ethan tensed, expecting some tactless questions. But Mrs. Johnson only gently asked how Ava and Lucas were doing, and if they needed help. Then she added, You know, my son went through a divorce a few years ago, and my granddaughter was 7 at the time. If your kids need someone to talk to, my granddaughter is a teenager now, but she went to a special group at church for kids in divorced families. It really helped them. If you want, I can find out if they have any of those anymore. Ethan thanked her sincerely. He wasn't particularly religious, but the idea of a support group for children seemed like a good idea. He had actually gone with Ava and Lucas to a couple of similar meetings at a local church later, where the kids were given art and games to play with and gentle conversations about family change. It wasn't mandatory, but Ava had particularly enjoyed it, befriending a girl who was also going through a divorce. Ava's teacher, Miss Robbins, also called one day. Ethan, I just wanted to say Ava has been a little sad lately. We know you have family circumstances. If anything, we have a psychologist at school, Miss Turner. You already talked to her, I think. We are all ready to help. Ava is a wonderful girl. We will support her. Lucas attended the same school, and his form teacher, Miss Green, wrote a short email that the boy's concentration had dropped a little, but she was giving him extra fun tasks to cheer him up. All this caring touched Ethan deeply. He realized that despite the blow that a loved one had dealt him, there were so many kind people around him. Even some of the parents who learned in general terms about what had happened, instead of judging him, offered to help. Take the kids on a weekend picnic with their family, invite Ava to the girls' slumber party to distract her. Ethan's colleagues at work, he was an engineer in a small company, also understood the situation. The boss himself called him in for a talk after learning about the temporary separation. Perhaps rumors had reached there, or Ethan himself had warned. If you need to take time off to resolve family issues, take it, don't be shy. You can even work from home for a while if the kids are sick or something else. Ethan accepted this flexibility with gratitude. One Saturday, a teenager, a member of the local Boy Scout troop, came to their door. "Mr. Blake?" he asked timidly. "We heard. Mrs. Walsh said. Anyway, can we come rake your yard tomorrow? Free. Just trying to help." Ethan was touched, and at first refused, but the guy insisted. "We're having a neighborhood kindness event, sir. Please allow us." The next day, a gaggle of boys and girls in scout kerchiefs were happily raking autumn leaves outside the Blake house, and Ethan and David were giving them lemonade. Children's laughter echoed around the yard, and Ava and Lucas were helping out too, the first time he'd seen them so carefree in a long time. In the evening, while putting his son to bed, Ethan heard from Lucas. "Dad, how good it is that we have such neighbors and friends, right?" "Yes, baby, very good," he smiled, patting him on the back. Ava, covering herself with a blanket, added, "I thought that when all this happened, we were the only ones left. But no, so many people are helping." Ethan sat down next to the children on the edge of the bed. "Do you see how many kind hearts there are around? We are lucky. Even if something bad happens, there will always be those who will support you." Lucas, already falling asleep, muttered, "And Mom? Does anyone help her? She's alone now." Ethan was silent for a second, then quietly replied, "I think so. Mom has friends too, and I try not to interfere with her seeing you. That's also help." He didn't tell the kids, but he knew that Madison did have support. Her sister from out of town came for a few days, and some teachers from the school, despite her misbehavior, expressed sympathy. After all, many had worked with her for years and valued her as a leader. Ethan was told that her parents even wrote a petition for her like, "Don't fire her, give her a chance." Ethan lay awake that night, thinking about the power of community. It was sad that their problem had become public knowledge, but on the other hand, without the publicity, they would not have felt how much others cared. He realized that there was no shame in accepting help. He had once prided himself on his independence, but now he realized that sometimes the best way to show strength is to let others lend a shoulder to cry on. He closed his eyes and silently thanked everyone who had been there for him during those days. This invisible circle of support had kept their family afloat. Ethan felt that little by little, very slowly, the wounds were beginning to heal thanks to the kindness that surrounded them. In mid-November, about a month and a half after the review began, the school district made its final decision. Madison was called to appear before the ethics and personnel committees. He and Travis sat next to each other at a table in front of the stern commissioners, including the county superintendent and lawyers. The atmosphere was cold and formal. The superintendent, a gray-haired man, opened the folder. "Miss Blake, Mr. Holt, an internal investigation has been completed regarding you. The commission has determined that the fact of close extra work relations between you did indeed take place." Madison looked down. Travis bobbed his Adam's apple, but said nothing. "Therefore," the superintendent continued, "you have violated district policy regarding professional conduct and supervisor-employee relationships. Although no law has been broken, your actions are considered highly unprofessional. He put the paper down and looked straight at Madison. Mrs. Blake, the committee recognizes your many years of service as principal. However, this incident has undermined confidence in your leadership. We have received complaints from several parents who have learned of what happened. It appears impossible for you to remain as principal. Madison sighed quietly, prepared for that conclusion. I understand, she whispered. The superintendent nodded and turned to Travis. Mr. Holt, you are less at fault from the point of view of subordination, but as an employee of the school, you also showed unacceptable immodesty. Your behavior created the preconditions for a conflict of interest. Travis frowned but replied, Understand. The HR representative, Miss Henderson, the same woman who informed Madison of the suspension, took the floor. So, the decision is this. Madison Blake is dismissed from her position as the school principal. The wording is at her own request or by mutual agreement. We are giving you the opportunity to leave yourself so that there is no entry in your work record about dismissal under this article. Madison's eyes filled with tears, but she said thank you. Thank you. The question of your future employment remains at the discretion of the district's management, the personnel officer continued. You will probably not be assigned any leadership positions for the next few years. If you want to stay on as a teacher, that's negotiable, but not in the school where you were the principal. I haven't decided yet, Madison shook her head. Maybe I need some time. Certainly. As for Mr. Holt, the superintendent intervened again, considering that you had no direct authority over your colleagues, but nevertheless violated ethics, you are being reprimanded. You are being transferred to another school for a similar position on probation. We hope you will learn from this. Travis nodded, apparently relieved that he was being spared. In fact, Madison had only one thought at that moment. It was all over. Her career as a director had ended sadly. She signed the document handed to her terminating the contract by mutual agreement. She left the county building after the hearing, unable to hold back her tears. Travis tried to hug her, but she pulled away. After everything that had happened, their relationship had also deteriorated. Too much had collapsed. In addition, Madison increasingly felt not love for him, but bitterness. The romance that had once seemed exciting had led to a catastrophe. They had barely communicated in recent weeks, and now, having each received their sentence, they decided to break up for good. Travis quietly said goodbye and walked away, not even offering her a ride. Left alone in the parking lot, Madison wiped her eyes and pulled out her phone. She wanted to tell someone about her shame, to get it off her chest. Her sister had already gone home, and she was embarrassed in front of her close friends. Suddenly, my fingers dialed the number. Ethan's. He didn't answer right away, only on the third ring. Yes, Madison. She sobbed. I'm done. I'm not at school anymore. I was removed, Ethan. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then he said quietly, I'm very sorry, and it seemed he really meant it, without sarcasm. Madison burst into tears while sitting in the car. What should I do now? Who have I become? No family, no job. We have a family, he replied softly. The children are our family. They still need you. After everything, they're probably ashamed of me, she squeezed out. No, don't be silly. They love you, Ethan replied wearily. Listen, where are you? Is there anyone with you? No, I'm alone. He paused and then suggested, maybe you shouldn't be alone right now. Do you want me to call Emily and she'll invite you to dinner, or? No, she shook her head, though he couldn't see it. No one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself, Ethan said quietly. Maybe you should. Go see a therapist, talk. It's a blow, I know. Yes, she whispered. Probably. They said goodbye. After hanging up, Madison felt a strange relief. For the first time in a long time, Ethan spoke without malice. She even heard a note of concern. Of course, regaining trust was almost impossible, but at least he did not finish her off, and even tried to support her. A few days after these events, Ethan and Madison told the children that their mother was no longer the principal. They avoided the rough edges. They said that she was tired, taking a break, and deciding what to do next. Ava, who was smart beyond her years, probably guessed, but she kept quiet. She just hugged her mother tightly and said, "Mommy, we love you." For Madison, this was the starting point for her rethinking. She realized that her children still needed her, regardless of her status. So she needed to continue living for them. The district inspection was behind them. The incident was officially closed. One page of their lives had been turned over. Now they all had to focus on family matters, albeit in a new family format. Weeks passed. The acute phase of the crisis gradually gave way to everyday routine. The Blake family, albeit in a renewed composition, found its own routine and small joys of everyday life. Every morning, Ethan woke the kids at 7 a.m. The house was filled with familiar sounds. The gurgle of the coffee maker, the slap of the kids' feet on the floor, soft music on the radio. Breakfast oatmeal or scrambled eggs was eaten with half an eye, while Ava finished her math problem and Lucas fiddled with his shoelaces. Ethan corrected them every now and then. "Ava, don't forget your lunchbox. Lucas, have you brushed your teeth?" It was nothing special, an ordinary morning, like thousands of other families with children. But after the upheaval they had endured, this normality felt like a blessing. The kids adapted to the new routine. Ava began packing her school bag more independently and went to bed on her own schedule in the evenings. Lucas still missed his mom putting him to bed, but his dad learned to tell stories just as well, sometimes even role-playing, which made his son laugh. On Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, Ava went to an art club, which Ethan paid for, wanting to keep her busy with something creative. On Wednesdays, Lucas went to a soccer club, where his mother had enrolled him. Ethan continued to take him without changing his habits. In the stands, among the parents, he sometimes made eye contact with Madison. She tried to come watch her son practice. They exchanged polite nods. At first, this was difficult, but over time, it also turned into a kind of routine. At least the children saw that both parents were nearby, even if not together. On weekends, there was already an established pattern. On Saturday afternoons, Madison would pick up the kids at her place. She rented a small apartment nearby. Sometimes she would take them to the park, to the movies, or to visit her grandmother Madison's mother in a neighboring town. At first, Ethan was worried about how these meetings would work, but everything went smoothly. Madison returned the kids on time. They were always well-fed and happy. True, after the first such separations, Lucas would cry upon returning, asking why his mother couldn't live with them. But gradually he, too, understood the new order and calmly waved his hand to his mother. "See you next week." The family usually spent Sundays together with their dad. Ethan tried to come up with activities, either going to a science museum or just having a lazy day at home with pizza and movies. Once they made a birdhouse together in the yard, an idea Lucas got from scouts. Ava drew patterns on it. It turned out clumsy, but they proudly hung it on a tree. In these quiet moments, Ethan often found himself thinking, "We're doing fine." He saw the children's smiles, heard their laughter less, and less sadness clouded their faces. Things were improving at school, too. Ava's grades were back to their former high level. Lucas's complaints about absent-mindedness had disappeared. Several sessions with Miss Turner, a psychologist where Ethan took the children on her recommendation, had clearly done them good. Separately, Ethan began to see a psychologist himself, on the advice of the same Miss Turner. At first, he resisted, "I don't have time, and why would I?" But one day, when he caught himself exploding with anger at a trivial misdeed by his son, he realized that there was a lot of resentment and anger left inside that needed to be worked through. Visiting a specialist once a week helped him to release these emotions in a safe environment. Gradually, he learned to forgive, not in the sense of forgetting everything and returning to the past, but in order not to allow the resentment to burn him from the inside. Madison, as far as Ethan knew, had also gone to therapy. She had mentioned in passing that she had begun to work on her mistakes once during a meeting. She looked humble and quiet. The storm of emotions in their interactions had subsided. Instead of reproaches or tears, They now exchanged short messages about children's affairs, the schedule of clubs, health, school news. Everything was extremely correct. One weekday evening, after the kids had fallen asleep, Ethan found himself looking through a family album. In the photos, a happy Madison was hugging him and the kids, grinning from ear to ear. A year ago, he couldn't have imagined that things would turn out like this. His heart ached despite everything. He missed those times. But when he turned the page, he saw fresh photos. Here he was with Ava and Lucas, the three of them now, holding that same birdhouse, covered in paint but happy. A new chapter of their lives was also captured, and it was filled with the children's smiles. So he had done everything right. Life went on as usual. Sometimes it was hard alone, of course. It was harder to run a household, manage to work, and pay attention to the children. Sometimes in the evenings, Ethan would fall off his feet, barely having put the children to bed. But every morning he woke up with a clear thought. He had someone to strive for, and despair retreated before this quiet but strong confidence. And so, in a series of small worries and joys, the Blake family entered winter. The first snowfall, they made a snowman together. On Christmas Day, they agreed to get together for the sake of the children. Ethan agreed to invite Madison to join them for the morning unwrapping of presents. It was a little awkward, but the children were happy to have both parents, albeit keeping their distance, present for the holiday. Everyday life became a cure. No loud dramas, no tears, just day after day, step by step, they learned to live again. And in this quiet family routine, strangely enough, the stability they all dreamed of was born. Spring brought continued stability into their lives. By this time, each family member had developed a new way of life. The children grew stronger emotionally, calmed down. Mom and Dad did not quarrel, on the contrary. They communicated evenly, although a bit coldly. Ethan and Madison were a case study in polite distance. Their brief encounters at baby swaps and school functions were polite, but unusually formal. An outside observer, without the context, might have assumed that the two were barely acquainted, brought together by necessity. Here, for example, is a parent-teacher meeting in Ava's class. Ethan arrived a little early and sat down on a chair in the third row. A couple of minutes later, Madison came in. He nodded to her, she smiled slightly, and after hesitating, sat down next to her. After all, issues concerning their daughter were being discussed. It was logical to sit together. They barely spoke to each other during the meeting. Only once, when the teacher mentioned that Ava was showing talent in drawing and that it should be encouraged, Madison leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "I know a good art studio. We could try taking her there." "Sounds good," he replied just as quietly. "Send me the contact information. I'll take a look." That was the end of the conversation. After the meeting, the two of them approached the teacher and asked a couple of questions about their academic performance, all the while acting in a businesslike manner. Saying goodbye at the school, Ethan said, "Thank you for coming." "Well, she's our daughter," Madison answered simply. There was an awkward pause. Before, they would probably have gone out for ice cream as a family after the meeting. Now, everyone felt the boundary between them. "Well, see you on Saturday," Ethan said, meaning Mom's next day with the kids. "See you on Saturday," she echoed. They went their separate ways to their cars. This scene, in essence, reflected the whole essence of their relationship in those months. Correct, decorous, and no intimacy. In public, they looked like a completely civilized divorced couple, and few people guessed what wounds were hidden behind the external calm. Ethan sometimes found himself missing the normal conversations with Madison about trivial matters, about the kids, about weekend plans. Now all communication was reduced to exchanging text messages and rare calls strictly on business. These text messages contain dry phrases. "I'll pick you up at 10 o'clock at the house. Lucas has a cold, give him syrup. Don't forget to sign the permission slip for the excursion." Not a single unnecessary word. They both kept this distance like an unspoken pact. Perhaps they were afraid that any personal topics would reopen the sores, or maybe they simply didn't know what to say to each other except about the children. However, this stable and cool situation suited everyone for now. The children saw that their parents did not argue, and this was enough for their sense of security. Ethan was calm that Madison did not cross the line. She no longer tried to enter the territory where she was not welcome. She called strictly at the agreed time, came for them on schedule, did not stay late unnecessarily, did not express complaints about their upbringing, even if, perhaps, she did not agree with everything. At the same time, each of them lived their own lives. Ethan was completely immersed in work and caring for the children, having practically no time for anything else, but that was fine with him. In his rare free hours, he went to the gym or met David to watch a football match. Friends cautiously asked if he wanted to try going on a date sometime, but Ethan just waved them off. It's too early. Inside, he had neither the desire nor the moral strength to think about a new relationship. Madison, too, focused on her own affairs. After being fired, she took a break from her career. According to her sister, who relayed it to Ethan, Madison was thinking about taking retraining courses, perhaps even changing her career altogether, to start from scratch. During these months, she devoted a lot of time to introspection, read books on psychology, and went to therapy. She had practically no close friends left, probably due to both shame and the change of environment. But she tried. At least Madison carefully planned every meeting with the children, came up with interesting activities, as if wanting to atone for her guilt through ideal motherhood. Ethan sometimes warned her that it was not necessary to organize attractions every Saturday. Her children simply needed her attention. She agreed, but it seemed she continued to try beyond measure. So the spring passed and summer approached. It seemed that life was settled in an acceptable way. But under this smooth surface, there were still unspoken regrets, unfinished stages of forgiveness. Ethan understood. This will always be like this, if nothing changes. They will have a quiet, cold coexistence for the sake of the children and nothing more. Perhaps this is the only true path. But sometimes at night, lying in an empty bedroom, he wondered, could it be better? Couldn't we learn from everything that had happened and become? Maybe not spouses again, but at least people who had truly forgiven each other and could move on without a burden on their hearts. These thoughts led him to an idea he had initially dismissed, but which came back to him through circumstances, to try formal mediation, a meeting with a psychologist or mediator, where he and Madison could openly discuss the future. The initiator, oddly enough, was Madison herself. One day, as she handed over the children, she suddenly said quietly, looking down, "I found out. There is a family center where they help former spouses establish cooperation. Maybe we should try going." Ethan was taken aback at the time, but replied that he would think about it. And so, at the beginning of the summer, he finally made up his mind. He agreed to mediation. Deep down, he wanted to finally sort things out without any omissions and dot all the I's. Either to finally let go of the past, or, although he didn't allow himself to even dream about renewing the marriage, but as an honest man, he admitted, part of him still loved the woman Madison had been before the betrayal, and perhaps, if she sincerely repents and changes, someday they could at least be friends. Either way, they decided to give it a try. The stability they had achieved at the cost of distance needed to be re-evaluated. An important step was ahead, an open dialogue about the future in the presence of a third party. Ethan didn't know how it would turn out, but he felt that the time had come for this final honesty. The neutral office of the family center looked cozy, soft chairs, calming landscapes on the walls. 3 people sat at a large round table, Ethan, Madison, and the mediator, a woman of about 50 named Sandra, an experienced psychologist with a friendly expression on her face. This was already the 3rd mediation meeting. At the first 2, Sandra helped them talk through accumulated grievances in a civilized manner and focus on the needs of the children. Now that the main practical issues had been resolved, the mediator gently led them to the topic of personal forgiveness and possible future interaction. "Ethan, Madison," Sandra began softly, "today I want to invite you to share with each other what may have been left unsaid. This is important to finally clear the air. Madison, you said you wanted to apologize and explain your point of view. Perhaps now is the time." Madison nodded. She looked tense, her fingers fiddling with her handkerchief. Ethan sat across from her, arms crossed, trying to maintain the openness he had been taught in previous sessions. Madison turned to face him. Ethan, first of all, forgive me. I know you've heard this before, but I'll say it again. I'm so sorry. I've done something terrible to you and to our children. She swallowed, continuing. I thought for a long time about how I could do such a thing. I would like to say that I lost my head, that it was a temporary madness. But the truth is that I was deeply unhappy in some sense, and I didn't understand it myself. That's not an excuse, no, but she searched for words. Ethan was silent, listening intently. You've always been a great husband and father, she said quietly. Kind, reliable, maybe even too reliable, and me, I must have had some unfulfilled ambitions or just a midlife crisis. When Travis started paying me attention, instead of pulling myself up short, I let it happen. I was flattered that someone was interested in me as a woman, and not just as a director and a mother. It's so stupid. Her eyes became moist. I betrayed your trust. I destroyed our family. No reason can justify it. Believe me, I cry about it every day. If only I could go back. Her voice shook. Sandra handed her a box of tissues, and Madison wiped away her tears. I am working on myself. The psychologist says that I was talking about selfishness and fatigue, that I was looking for escapism. But none of that matters now. What matters is that I truly repent. Ethan, I understand that I have destroyed your trust in me, perhaps forever. I am not asking you to return everything to how it was. I know myself that this is impossible. But, she looked him straight in the eyes. I ask you someday, maybe not now, but someday to forgive me. Not even for my sake, but for your own. You have become a wonderful single father. I watch and admire how you cope. The children are lucky to have you. I want it to be easier for you so that there is no more pain. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He expected an apology, but this was what touched him, that she was thinking about his pain. He cleared his throat, trying to speak evenly. Thank you for saying that. Honestly, I've been wanting to hear that for a long time, that you really understand the scale. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, collecting his thoughts. In those months when everything came out, I thought I would never be able to forgive. I hated you then, he admitted, looking into her eyes. It's a terrible feeling, especially towards a person you love at the same time. Madison let out a soft sob at the word love. But time passed, Ethan continued. I thought a lot, went to a psychologist too. And I realized one thing. Holding on to hatred means continuing to let this betrayal control me. And I don't want to. For the sake of the children, for myself, and for yours too, I guess, he sighed. You are the mother of my children, and you always will be. We are bound forever by this. So we need to find a way to coexist without this burden. He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, I forgive you, Maddie. Madison inhaled sharply, not expecting to hear that right now. Is it true? I'm not saying that everything is forgotten or that we can pretend like nothing happened, he clarified. But I'm not angry anymore. It still hurts, yes, but there's no anger. He straightened up, clasping his clasped hands tighter. I see you're trying to change, and I appreciate it. At least now I'm not afraid that the children are in emotional danger with you. I know that you put them first. That's important. Madison nodded, hanging on every word. Ethan continued. I don't know what will happen next. Most likely, sooner or later, we will officially finalize the divorce. We will no longer be able to be husband and wife. Too much has been destroyed. Madison looked down, quietly agreeing. But, he added, that doesn't mean we can't work together as parents, and even, perhaps, over time, become, if not friends, then at least good acquaintances. At these words, she looked at him again. It would mean a lot to me. Sandra had been listening to the exchange, barely interfering, giving them space. Now she asked softly, Madison, how do you feel when you hear this? Madison sniffled, but it was more tears of relief. I feel so, at peace. I don't deserve to be forgiven, but I'm glad you don't hate me anymore. There's no hatred, Ethan confirmed. There's sadness, of course, but there's no longer a desire for revenge or anything like that. Sandra smiled. This is huge progress for both of you. You've done a great job. I would encourage you to continue to maintain an open dialogue and not be afraid to bring in specialists if things get tough again. But from what I can see, you're on the right track, she added, looking at them both approvingly. Ethan and Madison exchanged conciliatory smiles as well. For the first time in a long time, understanding was established between them. At the end of the session, they discussed practical steps, how they would communicate further, how to finalize the divorce if they decided. Both agreed that there was no need to rush into it, they could live like this. It was more important to emotionally put everything in its place. When we left the center, Ethan suddenly stopped in the parking lot. Listen, maybe you want to come over to the kids tonight. We'll have dinner together. Just like parents, nothing special. Madison was surprised he himself hadn't invited her to cross the threshold of the house for a long time. Yes, of course, she smiled timidly, if you're sure it's okay. I think we can do it once, Ethan nodded. They'll be pleased. Me too, she added quietly. They said goodbye until the evening with a slightly warmer feeling than usual. That day, Ethan felt a huge weight lifted from his shoulders. You can't change the past, but you can stop being its hostage. Madison was sincerely trying to be a better person, and although their paths had already diverged, they still had a long road ahead of them to raise children, and now it promised to be less thorny than in the first months after the breakup. A quiet hope was born in his soul that in time they would all remember what had happened not as a wound, but as an experience that had made them stronger and wiser. There was one last step left to let go of the situation completely and move on with my life. A summer evening was falling on a quiet street. The light was soft inside the Blake house, where 4 people were eating dinner together at the large kitchen table. Simple but favorite dishes were on the table: mac and cheese casserole, a fresh salad, and homemade lemonade. The window was slightly open, letting in the warm evening air, scented with cut grass and flowers. At first glance, it was a typical family, parents and 2 children discussing the day's events. And then my dad and I bought a new ball. It's so bouncy, Lucas said excitedly, waving his arms. Really? We should play together sometime, Madison smiled, pouring milk for her son. Mom, do you remember how you promised to show me how to paint with watercolors wet on wet? Ava asked. Of course I remember, honey. We'll do it this weekend, Madison replied. Ethan felt a warm wave of quiet happiness as he watched his children and wife. The scene seemed almost ordinary, everyday, and this brought tears of gratitude to his eyes. Just recently, he had been afraid that he would never see them all together at the same table without tension and pain. After dinner, the kids ran outside to catch fireflies in the twilight. Ethan and Madison were left alone to clear away the dishes. They worked together as if they were a team again. Only now they were a different team, not a married couple, but allies for the sake of their children. Thank you for inviting me, Madison said quietly, wiping her plate. It means a lot to me to spend the evening here with them. They missed these evenings, Ethan replied, and to be honest, I did too. Madison looked at him warmly. I'm glad that we managed to come to this. Me too, he smiled with the corner of his lips. It makes me feel better. They finished drying the last plate. On the way to the bedroom, Ava quietly said to her father, Thanks for inviting Mom today. It was almost like before. Lucas, rubbing his sleepy eyes, sleepily confirmed, Yet it was good. Ethan smiled back, I liked it too, guys. The children, satisfied, fell asleep with smiles. Upstairs, they could already hear the ringing laughter of Ava and Lucas, who had jumped around enough, carrying a jar of fireflies into the house. Above them, the first stars were scattering, cicadas were chirping, and fireflies were twinkling in the air like little stars that had descended to earth. The children's laughter gradually died down, replaced by the peace of the approaching night. Time for bed, buddy, Ethan said softly, patting his son's head as Lucas yawned and snuggled closer to his father. He stood up, taking his son in his arms, Ava holding his free hand. They walked into the house. The night promised to be peaceful and cozy. While putting the children to bed, Ethan paused for a moment at the door of their room. The peaceful faces of his sleeping son and daughter were visible in the moonlight. He felt deep gratitude for the fact that, despite everything, they managed to preserve the most important thing, a loving family, albeit in a new format. Ethan quietly closed the door, walked into the living room, and sat down in a chair. He picked up a folder of documents from the table, the divorce papers that he and Madison would have to sign once they decided to do so. He opened the folder, glanced at the official lines, and carefully closed it back. Not today. Today was not the time to think about final points. Today was a moment of silence and reconciliation. His thoughts before falling asleep once again returned to the entire path they had taken. Once, he had thought that betrayal had destroyed everything irrevocably. But now he understood that if people were wise enough to set boundaries and not lose sight of the main thing, love for children and respect for each other, even the most difficult test can be survived. Trust can be restored, albeit in a different form. He felt that he trusted Madison again as a parenting partner, and in time, perhaps, he would be able to trust her as a friend. Ethan himself had grown in these months. Fatherhood, responsibility for loved ones had become his strengths. He was proud of himself and his children. Together, they had managed to go through the storm and reach the shore. The restoration of the family did not go according to the original scenario, but perhaps they created a new family with new rules, but still strong love. He stood up, turned off the light, and went to his bedroom to rest. There was still a lot to do, but he knew that their little family could handle it after all. There was now peace, love, and hope for the future in their home. After some time, Ethan and Madison jointly filed for an official divorce. It was just a formality that cemented what had already happened. The divorce was quiet and mutual, without legal wrangling. They remained neighbors in the neighborhood and partners in parenting. With each passing year, it became easier for them to interact at holidays, school events, and their children's birthdays. For example, at Ava's graduation party, they were able to sit next to each other and be proud of her accomplishments together. At subsequent birthday parties for their children, the parents organized joint celebrations without tension, with joy and laughter. Gradually, mutual respect grew even stronger. The old wound healed and turned into a scar noticeable, but not painful. In the future, when Ava and Lucas grow up, they will surely appreciate their parents' efforts to maintain peace and love in the family no matter what. And for Ethan, this was the main result. He not only protected his children, but also found a new meaning in life to be a reliable support for them and an example of resilience, honesty, and kindness. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.